They didn't throw him a parade. No flags, no music, no neighbors waiting on the curb with waving hands or signs that said welcome home. Just the hum of a Greyhound engine pulling away, and the scrape of his boots on cracked concrete. James Ford stood there, in his marine dress blues, clutching a duffel bag that weighed less than the silence around him. It was 1973. Vietnam was over. He had made it back. But as he looked around that bus stop on the south side of Chicago, it was clear nobody had been waiting. This is Injustice Brown. I'm Mark Joie. Welcome back to the channel. If this story moves you, if it reminds you of a truth you've seen or lived, hit that subscribe button and speak your mind in the comments. We read every word. James had done everything they told him to do. Graduate high school, serve his country, come back a man. But coming back didn't make him feel like a man. It made him feel invisible. He stood on that corner for a while, just staring out into the city that raised him. Buildings hadn't changed, but the way people looked at him had, or didn't. Some glanced over and walked faster. A few stared, then looked away quick like his uniform was a costume, a joke. The bars on his chest meant something once. Over there, they gave him a name. Sergeant Ford. Yes, sir, but here, they didn't even give him eye contact. He walked 8 blocks to his mother's house, trying not to limp. A bullet had torn through his leg in Quam Drive. It still ached in the cold, but he didn't want to look weak. Not here, not now. When he knocked on the door, his little sister opened it. Her eyes lit up. She was the first person who smiled at him all day. His mother hugged him so tight, he thought his ribs might crack. That one moment felt like home. But the next day, reality set in. He went to the corner store in uniform, thought maybe someone would nod, shake his hand, ask him what it was like out there. Instead, the old white man behind the counter said, thought they only drafted men, then slid his change across the counter like his hand might get dirty. James stared at him for a second, didn't say a word, just took the coins and walked out slow. Rage in his chest, shame in his throat. He had risked his life for a country that still saw his skin before his service. They told him war would change him, that he'd come back different, but they never said the country wouldn't. A week later, he went to the VA office to ask about the housing loan he'd earned. The clerk barely looked up, just handed him a stack of papers and said, processing times are long right now. You people aren't the only ones applying. You people. He looked down at the paperwork, then at the woman's face. She didn't even realize what she said, or maybe she did. Didn't matter. He had survived snipers, landmines, malaria, and hunger. He watched friends die screaming in the jungle, and now he was being broken by bureaucracy and indifference. No parade, no welcome, just the slow, bitter realization that he wasn't really home, not in the way it counted. James Ford didn't say much that first month back, just sat on the front porch some nights, uniform folded on his lap, watching traffic pass, watching life go on without him. He thought if he stayed quiet long enough, maybe someone would ask, maybe someone would see him. But in this America, a black man in uniform wasn't a hero. He was still just a black man, and that was the war he wasn't ready for. It started simple. James wanted a home, not a mansion, not a big lawn with a picket fence, just a 2-bedroom house on the south side. Room for him and Althea to build something steady, something peaceful. He had the paperwork. The VA loan was approved. His military record was clean. He had a job lined up at the post office. He didn't want a handout. He just wanted what he earned. The first real estate office was all smiles until they saw his face. Oh, I think everything in that area is under contract. He pointed to the sign outside. For sale. Still flapping in the wind. Oh, that. One's, already pending. But I can show you some other options. Out south. More. Your speed. He heard it, felt it in his gut, didn't say anything, just nodded, left. The second agent barely let him sit down, didn't even ask what he wanted, just said, inventory's low, and things move fast. You might want to try renting for a while. James opened his folder, pulled out the loan letter, the discharge papers, the income verification. The woman didn't even glance at them, just smiled like a mask, and said, I understand. But it's just a tough market right now. Later that week, he saw a white couple, couldn't have been older than 22, walk out of that same office with a key in hand. laughing, smiling. Same house, same price, different skin. He sat in the car that night, parked outside Althea's place, hands on the steering wheel, gripping tight, breathing slow, trying not to boil over. Althea came out to meet him. She leaned in the window. Any luck today? He didn't answer, just stared ahead. You tell Em about the VA loan. He nodded. They still said no. They didn't say no. He muttered. They just didn't say yes. That was the game. They didn't slam the door. They let it creak open, then made you feel stupid for trying to walk through. He tried 5 more offices over the next 2 weeks. Same script, same smiles, same invisible wall, different wording. This neighborhood's not what it used to be. You'd be more comfortable over by 83rd. We have to consider community fit. Community fit. He walked out of one office and almost laughed. He'd been shot at by strangers in another hemisphere. Slept in rice paddies with rats crawling over his boots. But this quiet little war, this one was colder, slicker, harder to see coming. The bank didn't help either. He submitted everything, all his documents. Sat in the chair while the loan officer nodded and scribbled and said, "We'll be in touch." That was 3 weeks ago. Every time he followed up, the answer was the same. We're reviewing. These things take time. Meanwhile, houses were being sold right out from under him to people who hadn't served, who didn't even qualify for a loan like his. Althea saw it too. She started keeping a notebook. Every address, every agent, every lie. She didn't say much when James came home quiet, shoulders heavy. She just hugged him harder, asked him what he wanted for dinner, sat with him in the silence. One night, he finally cracked, slammed his fist on the kitchen table and said, "What did I even fight for, Althea? Huh? What the hell did I bleed for?" She didn't flinch. "You fought to stay alive," she said. "Now you fight to live." He stood up, walked to the window, watched the streetlights flicker on. "This ain't a war you can shoot your way out of," he whispered. "Ain't no enemy lines, just fake smiles and closed doors. Redlining. That's what it was called." He hadn't known the word until now, but he felt it. Felt it in the way maps were drawn without his name, in the way his file got buried, in the way nobody said no because that would have been to honest doubt. They just didn't say yes. Every rejection felt like a wound that wouldn't bleed, just stayed under the skin. Swelling. James Ford had fought the Viet Cong with courage and clarity. Now he was fighting the banks, the brokers, the invisible ink on every contract. This war didn't need bullets. It just needed silence, and silence was killing him. Sometimes it came back in flashes, like heat lightning behind his eyelids. The jungle, the sweat, the scream, the blood. James didn't sleep much anymore. Not really. Just laid there, flat on his back, eyes open, listening to the ticking of a world that kept moving without him. Some nights he heard it again. That final breath, that choking sound Reggie made right before it stopped. Reggie Bell, Detroit-born, fast-talking, sharp-eyed. They used to call him Radio because he was always humming something, always cracking a joke even when the sky was falling. James hadn't laughed like that since. They were boys when they met, Marines by number, but still boys. Grew up in cities 300 miles apart, but they spoke the same language, understood each other in a way that didn't need explanation, the way only black soldiers did in a war that didn't see them as brothers. Reggie had a photo of his mama taped inside his helmet. Every time they huddled in a foxhole, he'd tap it twice for luck. "Ain't dying out here, man. I'm going home. Gonna open a barber shop. Name it Victory Cuts." He'd laugh. That loud cackle that scared off the rats. James believed him. He really did. Until the morning the sky would red dot. They were clearing a rice field outside Quang Tribe. Everything was still, to still. Then it hit. Mortar from the tree line. The first shell took out the guys in front. The second one landed behind them. Shrapnel sprayed like fire from the ground. Reggie screamed, fell backward, chest torn open. James dropped beside him, hands already soaked in blood. He pressed down, begged him to stay. Reggie's eyes were wide, then glassy, then gone. No medevac, no glory, just silence and heat. When it was over, James sat in the dirt, cradling what was left, dirt on his lips, blood on his boots. He never forgot the smell. He carried Reggie's tags for the rest of the tour, and now, years later, he still did. Every rejection letter, every "we'll call you back," every "not at this time." They weren't just insults. They were reminders that Reggie never made it home, and the one who did was being treated like garbage. He started drinking, just a little at first. A shot of bourbon at night to quiet the noise, but the noise didn't stop, so the bottle didn't either. Althea noticed. Of course she did. She didn't say much, not at first. Just cleaned up the empty glasses, held his face in her hands when he cried without meaning to, but the distance was growing. His silence had teeth now. One night she found him in the bathtub, fully dressed, water overflowing, just sitting there, eyes blank, holding Reggie's dog tags like a rosary. She sat on the tile, wet, shaking, holding him like a mother holds a child. "This ain't the jungle, James," she whispered. You're home. But he wasn't. The war had followed him, slipped into his dreams, his walls, his breath. It was in the paperwork that vanished, in the cops who drove past slow when he walked home at night, in the neighbors who crossed the street when they saw him. He fought for this country, bled for it, watched his brother die in a foreign ditch so he could come back and be told without words that he didn't belong here either. He tried to shake it, go to church, pray, listen to Althea read out loud from Psalms, but even God felt far away some nights. The bitterness came slow, like a fever. He started thinking maybe he should have died out there too. Would have been easier, would have been cleaner. But then he'd think of Reggie, and that damn smile, that laugh that cracked open even the darkest nights. James had a choice. He could waste the life Reggie didn't get, or he could find a way to live it. Not survive. Live. But living in a country that wanted you gone, that didn't want to hear you, house you, hire you, was its own battlefield. And this time, there were no dog tags to carry him through it, only pain. And memory. And the slow, burning fire of a man who wasn't finished fighting. The night was bitter, wind sharp enough to cut through his coat. James had walked for blocks from the last job posting taped to a store window, another resume in his pocket, another door that probably wouldn't open. The streets were quiet, too quiet. No buses running this late, just him and the cold. Then came the headlights. Slow, low to the ground, blue and white cruiser sliding up behind him like a shark beneath still water. He didn't panic. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking, paper in one hand, gloves in the other. He kept his head down. Then the car stopped. Doors opened. Two white officers stepped out. One tall, young, to clean. The other older, heavier, chewing gum like it owed him something. "Hey," the older one said, "what are you doing around here?" James turned, calm, just dropped off a resume at the appliance shop on 73rd. The young one squinted. "You live around here?" "No, just looking for work." "That right? Got ID?" James reached slow, showed his license, even pulled out his veteran's card. "I served Vietnam. Came home 2 years ago." The younger one took the card, held it up to the streetlight like it might bite him, then snorted. "You, a Marine?" James nodded once. The older cop smiled wide, shaking his head. "You should have stayed in the jungle, boy. Might have had better luck." Then they told him to put his hands on the hood. He hesitated. That was enough. Rough hands grabbed his coat, slammed him down, face pressed to frozen metal, arms yanked behind his back. He didn't fight. He just whispered, "Why?" The younger one leaned close, breath hot with tobacco. "Because you look like trouble." James didn't speak after that, didn't move. They patted him down, emptied his pockets. One of them tossed the resume into the slush beside the curb, crumpled. Useless. They didn't arrest him, didn't charge him, just left him there, face bleeding, dignity gone. When the car drove off, James stayed there for a minute, knees wet, breathing slow. It was quiet again, but not peaceful. That night, he made it back to Althea's apartment. Without saying a word, she opened the door and froze when she saw him. His cheek was split, lip bleeding, eyes blank. She helped him inside, took off his coat, sat him down. He didn't speak, just stared at the mirror across the room, at the blood on his chin, the marks on his neck, the bruise already forming across his ribs. Then he pulled his shirt off, turned around, looked at the scars across his back. Old ones, from the jungle, from shrapnel, from crawling under barbed wire and through burning grass. But those scars didn't hurt like this. He stared hard, like he was trying to see something deeper, the kind of wound no doctor could name. The kind that came from being reminded again that the uniform he wore didn't change the country he came back to. Althea touched his shoulder, voice cracking. "Do you want to talk about it?" He shook his head, then nodded. Then said nothing. Later that night, he sat in the dark, kitchen light off, one drink in front of him, just one. He stared at it for hours. Thought about Reggie, thought about his mother, thought about every door that closed in his face, every street that didn't want him, every man who smiled while denying him a place to stand. He had survived bullets, disease, 1,000 sleepless nights, and now he was being killed by a silence that nobody else seemed to hear. Racism didn't always come with burning crosses. Sometimes it wore a badge, smiled behind a desk, spoke in soft tones while stealing your future. That night, James almost gave up. Almost, but something deep inside held on. Not hope, not faith, just spite. Spite that said, "You won't break me. You don't get to win." Because this fight wasn't over. At this time, he was done playing nice. Althea had seen enough. She watched James shrink more each day, less in body, more in spirit. The man who used to walk proud, even with a limp, now moved like he was dodging ghosts. He barely spoke, ate in silence, stared through walls like they weren't there. But she was still there, and she wasn't about to let the world erase him. So, one morning, while he sat outside on the stoop, eyes fixed on nothing, she sat at the kitchen table and began to write. It wasn't poetry, it wasn't pretty, it was truth. She wrote about how he came home from war to locked doors, about the house he tried to buy, the files that vanished, the bruises on his ribs from the cops who didn't see a Marine, just a black man in the wrong place. She wrote about the medals he never showed anyone because they didn't seem to matter anymore. She mailed the letter to a local black journalist who ran a small column in the city paper. Didn't expect much, just needed someone to know. 2 weeks later, the phone rang, and everything changed. The article ran on a Sunday, page B3. Title said, "Veteran denied his country twice." It spread faster than either of them expected. By Monday, the phones at the paper were ringing nonstop. By Tuesday, a small church on 81st invited James to speak. He didn't want to, didn't think he could, but Althea went with him, hand wrapped in his. He stood at that pulpit, stiff at first, but when he started talking, really talking, it felt like opening a dam. He spoke of Reggie, of bleeding for a country that turned its back, of bankers who smiled as they buried his file, of cops who looked him in the face and still saw nothing worth respecting, and the people listened. More than listened, they felt it. Other vets came forward, some from Vietnam, some from Korea, one from World War II who still hadn't gotten a housing loan. 3 decades later, the church filled. The voices rose. By Friday, a black city councilman was asking questions on the record. The newspaper ran a second story front page this time. James's face, headline, "One man, many stories." The bank called. Nervous voice on the other end said they were re-reviewing his application. Said it had all been a misunderstanding. Then the VA called. Then the phone didn't stop ringing. The dam had cracked. And for the first time in years, James didn't feel powerless. He felt seen. No, it didn't fix everything. The city didn't apologize. The cops didn't get charged. But a door opened, just wide enough to step through, and when he did, James didn't look down. He looked forward, because silence couldn't survive the truth. Not anymore. The grass was patchy. The paint on the mailbox had started to chip. One of the shutters hung, crooked on the second floor, but to James Ford, it was the most beautiful place on earth. The year was 1982. He stood on the front steps of his home coffee in one hand, pride in the other. The porch creaked beneath his boots, the same pair he'd worn back from Vietnam. He'd never replaced them, said it kept him grounded. His son, Marcus, 6 years old and wild with energy, chased a paper airplane across the front yard. Althea sat on the porch swing behind him, humming softly, sunlight warm in her face. The mortgage had come through a black-owned firm in the West Side, the first place that looked at his paperwork before they looked at his skin. They didn't give him charity, just fairness. He worked double shifts at the post office, saved every cent, moved slow, steady, stubborn like a man carrying more than just a dream. Every brick of that house held weight, not just wood and mortar, memory, struggle, names he hadn't spoken in years. Reggie, Dawson, Little Mac. All of them had bled beside him. None of them made it home, and even the ones who did were never quite whole again. James stepped down off the porch, walked to the sidewalk, and just looked at it all. The yard, the trees, the door he had a key for. He didn't have a lawn service. Didn't need one. He trimmed that grass himself every Saturday morning. Sometimes Marcus helped. Sometimes he just asked questions. Daddy, what was the war like? James never gave him the whole picture, just pieces. It was loud, he said once, but the silence after it was louder. Marcus didn't understand yet. One day he would. James never got that parade, never heard an apology from the men who roughed him up, never saw the real estate agents again, and no courtroom ever said what they did to him was wrong. But standing there now, as the wind moved slow through the trees, he felt something deeper than justice. He felt presence, proof that he hadn't been erased, that the war tried to take his life and the country tried to take his dignity, but neither one could bury him. He was still here, still standing, and his boy would grow up in a home built on something stronger than stone. Refusal. That's what it was. Refusal to vanish, refusal to accept less than what he earned, refusal to let silence write the ending. He'd never call himself a hero. That word had been twisted too many times. But he was something else. He was proof that history doesn't always belong to the loudest. Sometimes it belongs to the ones who endure, who hold their ground even when it shakes beneath them, and who pass on something no court or bullet can take. A legacy. James looked back at the house. Althea smiled at him. Marcus ran past with another paper plane. He closed his eyes for a second, heard Reggie's laugh again. This time, it didn't hurt. This time, it felt like peace, because the war didn't win. He did.